Good afternoon. This is Kamalika on behalf of Artscape. Uh, the ones who are following our page would know that we are in the space of mental well-being, and we use expressive arts therapy to create a work for mental well-being and create a space of positivity and mental emotional empowerment. Over during the lockdown, we have been having these series of conversations with people from all walks of life, where we are trying to create a sharing platform where we can talk about our fears, our anxiety, and also the ways and means that we are handling this situation. Because it is an unprecedented time, we don't know how to navigate it, but we are all finding our own ways to live through this. And this afternoon, it is my absolute pleasure to invite on this platform Shishir Joshi, who's the founder of Project Mumbai and who is also the co-founder of Khana Chahiye. And with Shishir as our guest, Artscape starts the series of Stories of Impact. Welcome, Shishir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kamalika. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your time. Shishir, I just want to come straight to the point and say that, you know what, you've been so inspiring. What you have been doing, forget your work, keeping that aside, your work as Project Mumbai before the lockdown. Of course, that's extremely influential and effective. But during the lockdown, how you deep dived into the problem and what you have been doing, I feel hesitant to say that I've been following it on social media, and of course, a little bit of help here and there, but you have been on the field. So I would want to ask you that even for you, the lockdown was a surprise. What was that one thing that made you want to get onto the field and begin this entire program or venture or collaboration, whatever you call it, because it was mammoth?
Well, Kamalika, I would not say it was sudden for us because personally and at Project Mumbai, we have been, and I'm sure like so many other organizations, but we have been in the space of trying to create opportunities for people for better living. So the Project Mumbai tagline also is people, purpose, and positive change. And in that space, people remain at the fundamental base of whatever we'd like to do. And when we saw what was beginning to happen, we realized that again, people would be the ones who would be impacted. And when I say people, I look at myself that if I am likely to get impacted, there are others who could be as, if not more, impacted. And every touch point that requires addressing, it can be addressed by me, by us, and by the multiples of us that are around us. So it wasn't really a sudden space we got into that it could be maybe we weren't doing anything, so let's do something. But we were already in the various spaces, and we said, now let's start doing more of whatever that's possible. Newness of initiatives or newness of challenges kept happening, which led us to scaling up at different levels or touching out new spaces, and which, of course, we'll talk to. There were mental health is a space we've always been in. Or helping senior citizens is a space we've always been in, or volunteerism and environment are spaces we've always been in. Citizenship, we've always been. So what we did was we ended up bringing all these together and involving them into the various touch points at different areas. So that is what it was. We have a very strong base of volunteers who are kind of reflecting what we do, or I reflect what they feel in some way. They are all go-getters who would like to contribute to the society. And our effort was put them all together. It could be individuals or it could be organizations. And we played the role of a catalyst in some cases, leaders in some cases, being followed in some cases, and followers in some cases. Things just happened, I guess. We were fortunate to be where we are, and we are where we are today.
Right. But Shishir, see, I understand that, you were in this space, but what you have been able to achieve was what I saw is a
streamless collaboration between the government, between the BMC, between Project Mumbai, between various other individual organizations, between citizens, between the police. But that, how did you streamline the entire thing? How did you make that possible?
I think our strength has been our ability to be dynamic in nature. So there are organizations, and I could name hundreds of them which are doing great work, maybe in healthcare, great work in maybe infrastructure, in child development, into senior citizen care. But where Project Mumbai's strength has been is our ability to say that yes, we could be in a position to help in whichever space that is required. So what happens is when anybody reaches out to us, we would not say, okay, maybe call them, they may be able to help you, because people are stressed out now. And that's one space which is the most critical that requires addressing: mental health. So when you have somebody coming to you seeking help, I think the last thing I should be doing is to say, I don't think I'm in a position to help you. You know, we're really causing more harm to that person. And in that space, because we were aware and we are aware fully how important a person's mental well-being is, we readied ourselves to say, if somebody is there for help, we need to be in a position to help them out. So even if it is a space which is alien to us, let's learn the ropes and ensure that the person doesn't go dejected, because that dejection is likely to cause more harm. So to give you a simple example, when early in the space, when the government reached out to us to say doctors need food, and this was much before Khana Chahiye happened. Now doctors need food, so one can easily say, how do I provide food to doctors? But what does it take? It doesn't take too much. So when I need food, either I go to the kitchen, or I cook, or I request somebody to cook. Now it's the elementary skill sets of the life skill sets. So yes, there are kitchens. We reached out to people who had kitchens, said, listen, doctors need food. Ask the elementary questions: how many people need food, what kind of food, what can be served. And we learned by the day that somebody said, okay, this much can be provided, this is what kind of food. So today, if you ask me what is the best kind of food that can be provided, yes, rice-based meals. A lot of people said, why is everybody being only served rice-based? Khichdi every day. Don't you think people will get bored? But the fact is, imagine roti. So people would love roti chapatis, roti vegetables, and all those things. But imagine a 12:30 meal that needs to be delivered at a location. And the other thing we learned on the way, that means that food needs to leave the location where it's being cooked by 10:30, because the 1 hour travel time we are factoring in. So 10:30 अगर खाना बन के निकल रहा है, यानी 9:30 बजे बनना हो जाएगा, क्योंकि packing, and it has to cool off a little bit, because hot food that you pack is likely to get spoiled on the way. So 9:30 it needs to be ready. So 9:30 if the food is ready, and 12:30 it gets delivered, that means around 8 o'clock, 6:30, 7, 8, it starts getting ready. So 5-6 hours it's already gone before the food was ready. And if the doctors who are eating it, or people who are eating it, are likely to eat it not at 12:30 when it's supposed to, but maybe 1:30, 2, because doctors are busy, they have their schedules. अगर 2 बजे वो वही खाना खाएंगे, तो it's likely to get spoiled. Then it's not fair. It's a far more damaging problem than create. So there would be people who say, can we have rotis? But the challenge of rotis was it could get spoiled. Rotis also meant a sabzi. A sabzi means you need to bifurcate the packaging content into 2 different parts. And due to the lockdown, a lot of the importers of packaging equipment were unable to bring it into Bombay. So these are problems which most people may not understand. So we had to explain this to them, that rice-based is best. It's more nutritious, it's sustainable. And within that, yes, we can make is a day there could be a rice, plain rice and dal. Another day it could be khichdi. Another day it could be rajma chawal. Another day it could be pulao, and so on and so forth. So different elements that we could bring in. We had our limitations, and we are fortunate that the doctors or recipients at any level understood this fact. And we did not differentiate between a doctor eating food or a man on the street eating food. The nutritious quality, the hygiene quality was the same, A class. That was never a compromise on those things. But these were learnings. If one had to jump into new spaces, these were new spaces. But we learned. I did not say, oh, we can't provide food. I think you may have to find somebody else. That would mean, again, adding to people's distress.
Since we are talking about the about food. We're talking about food for the doctors. One thing that I would like to say here is that I think for a person who's hungry, I don't think chawal or roti would have mattered really. But that person, I think any kind of food cooked, I think that would have been so much of providing so much of solace. Shishir, on the in
I
this,
know, can I interrupt you here, Kamalika? You're right that when you're hungry, what kind of food? But I did not want to go by that premise because dignity is so important. So you may be hungry and very hungry, but I would not want to build on that and give whatever. We'd like to provide you the best possible under the circumstances, what every human being deserves. And that is where our focus was. So, which is what the point I made earlier that there were people, and I'll jump one point is that when we did the Khana Chahiye, and the team, a fantastic bunch of go-getters there, we provided bananas for children who were hungry, who had lesser privileges. Within that, we created, the Khana Chahiye team created these small chota packets in which we put bananas and biscuit packets. So a child with lesser privileges also is gifted a little packet of food, not given or not provided or not fed. You're gifting a little bag of whatever so that the child feels privileged that he's been gifted it. So you may be hungry, but we are not here to provide hungry. We are here to do a service to you.
Right. Shishir, anything you would...
I've lost you, Kamalika. I can't hear you at all. Yeah, now I can hear you. No, again, I've lost you. Sorry, I think the earpiece could be a problem.
Unmuting it. Is that okay? Can you hear
me?
That's
good. Now it's it. Yeah.
Okay. So Shishir, since we are on the subject of food, can you just share how many meals did you ultimately till date supply, or have you gifted to people? How many meals would that be?
I just saw the data as of yesterday and the day before. It runs to close to 35 lakh meals over the last, from the 29th of March that we started. It's not only Project Mumbai. We were part of the larger team of Khana Chahiye. So 35 lakh meals. It runs across different areas. So there is the core Khana Chahiye team, which has been providing for the initial stages of lockdown to people who are homeless with lesser privileges and people who had lost jobs, gradually moving down to other spaces where migrants who are leaving the city or people who are citizens who are going to back to their hometowns, so on the stations and on the exitways of highways, providing them food, or Neeti, who was spearheading that entire Ghar Bhejo campaign, providing food for those people as well. And in that space, there was a lot of food given to people traveling by train. So that was the other. And as it continues now, there are people who are still in the city who are waiting for the next train back home. So different categories of food that we've been providing. Moving from cooked food, we also moved into groceries because it was important that sustainability comes in, more sustained living happens. So those who could cook, then we gradually moved from cooked food to providing grocery kits to these families.
On the subject of groceries, Shishir, I can only imagine that for us, even for households, we were not being able to get initial days I'm talking about, when we were not even able to buy things that we needed when there was the initial days. So I can only imagine how difficult it would have been for you people and your team to be able to source those amounts and in the rice, whatever you need, the dal, in that amount of kilos, or you had to buy. It must have, that would have also been very difficult, even the raw material with all the markets shut.
Different people face different challenges. I would say we were the least of the inconvenience. If you look at it, I could give you an example of organizations working in, let's say, M East Ward, which is Chembur, Deonar, that area, organizations like Koro and Apnale, and sometimes even Pratham stepped in there, because those are areas where the need is really acute. Those are also the containment zones in the plenty. That's also an entire red area where access is difficult. Plus the fact that the number of positive cases were increasing by the day, and there were slum pockets in large numbers. So if you're a containment zone, that means access to your health workers is not possible. which also means some of your volunteers going there are also risking their lives moving into these areas. So there are a lot of these spaces which are far bigger challenges than procuring groceries. These are things which we learn by the day. Okay, if it's not available with this person, we can go to that. But सामान लेके तो आ गए हैं, उसको दिलाएंगे कैसे? कौन देगा? वो क्योंकि आज वो भी एक दिक्कत है कि who will go out on the street and deliver? One, police permissions are the administrative issues. Second, health issues. I don't know which one comes more important. Health is for sure, because you're exposing each of your team members to these spaces as well. And that is also has also been a challenge throughout.
Right.
So I really, my compliments to these organizations, and hats off to these organizations which have done phenomenal work in pockets which are very difficult to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Correct, correct. Shishir, you spoke about dignity. And I want to know a little bit about the care that you delivered to the elderly, and also who are physically disadvantaged. I know that you ran a program for that as well.
Yeah, in fact, we still do. We felt that these are, so we're looking at all the pockets on segments of society which really need help. So while at one level everybody did, but there are people who are able-bodied, so they could fend for themselves. But sorry, there were children and senior citizens. So in these two categories, we tried to work out. Children do have caregivers in their home space, but there were a lot of senior citizens and people with disabilities, but living alone, who were very vulnerable for multiple areas. One, the virus is likely to impact senior citizens much more. So they were also by law asked by the administration to stay indoors. So they could not step out. Also, if shops are opening up for a very limited time, the shops are flooded with people, these senior citizens may find it extremely difficult to navigate their way through those crowds or wait in long queues to get what they really want. Third, their needs are also very different. In that space, our effort was to ensure that their convenience is looked at and attended to first. So when we opened this up idea to our team of volunteers, the response from our volunteers was overwhelmingly nice to say, yes, we'd like to. So we created a hyper-local network of volunteers per suburb, per area, and said we'd like to reach out to the senior citizens. And the same, there's Vineet Saraiwala, I'd like to make special mention to. Vineet has been working in the space of people with physical disabilities. And he suggested that can we also extend the senior citizen care to people with disabilities. And then we included that as well. Then we created that outreach. We spoke to a e-pharma firm, which opened up its doors to making online purchase of medicines specifically for senior citizens. And at a later stage, the municipal corporation also reached out to us to say, can we also partner with you all to do that? In that space, it was important to attend to. Not only was service important, but behavioral attitude also was very important, because very often senior citizens may ask for very little because they may not want to spend too much. So the frequency of delivery was also quite often with these people, with this category. And a lot of these people, for instance, did not need groceries. Some of them said, give us cooked food because our maids are not coming in now. We are living alone. The maids and the house help would be cooking for us and cleaning for us. But so we don't cook, we can't cook. There are people in their 80s, people in their 90s, people in their 70s also who are not in a position to cook, living alone. Their children either in the same part of the city, but due to the lockdown unable to reach there, or in some other country. And there are a lot of people from different countries who reached out to us, can you take care of our parents and provide them with help? In most cases we helped out. There were some cases we could not. Maybe the medicines were not available or there were challenges. So to that, what we also created, Kamalika, is that we asked buildings where they live to say, can you be the first aid opportunity for your senior citizen within the building? Because let's say it's a Kandivali building, for instance, and I may not have any resource to help out. We would find out if that building, there is somebody who can help out in the immediate space. But the other option, and what was more probable an option, was our own volunteers began cooking food from their homes and taking it to some of these senior citizens, not because I told them or I asked them. They all felt, there's somebody who's here who needs food, मैं मेरे घर से लेके जाता हूँ और deliver कर दूँगा. I think how more noble can this be? And this is all their own goodness, which has made us stronger.
Absolutely. Shishir, coming from here I just want to ask you, Uh, what there was a lot of issues, or we heard about stories or problems related to emotional distress. There was talk about domestic violence. There was talk about child abuse. And through what is your take on that? And if you can, you tell us more about Samvad that you have put together to address these issues with other agencies also. Because see, as I said at the beginning of the chat, that uh, we've all been kind of, we all have our emotional insecurities at this point of time. There's a lot of distress in all our minds. uh, what did you see? What has been your experience or knowledge on this bit?
So, Kamal, very early we felt, and Project Mumbai has been in the space of mental wellness. And so we realized that that is also a space on our own. We felt it needed to be addressed. So while the lockdown got announced on the 23rd of March, on the 19th of March itself, we had announced our first of the mental wellness helplines, because anxiety levels had already started growing in, because communication was really far and few in that space. So we started the mental health helplines there. Uh, Samvad we started much later, almost a month later, but was addressing concerns across Maharashtra. Mumbai does have mental wellness opportunities of redressal. There are counselors in schools, independent counselors, professional helplines and services. But what about people across Maharashtra? That was one, and I'll also address the domestic abuse part. The the challenges were that the response was not as high, and we were aware of it. So Prafulta, which is another organization in the space of mental wellness, which we partnered with, we had our response from counselors was overwhelmingly nice. Within 3 hours, we had close to 80 counselors who came on board to say we'd like to pro bono help out with the helpline. We also started something called special therapist needs for people who had family members with special needs. So two separate lines. But please do remember, if there's somebody who's in a mental anxiety space, he also needs some privacy to vent it out. And with lockdown happening, if I'd like to vent out my worries, I may not be able to, because everybody is around me. I may not want to express my concerns when too many people are watching me. And not everybody, most people don't have the luxury of a private space in their home when all family members are around. So that was one space where we felt calls will be far and few. And the second was the domestic abuse space, because this has also highlighted, while we've read so much about it, we know that domestic abuse will definitely be on the rise, because these are new situations everybody's been forced to live under, and which will trigger unusual behavior, and there will be perpetrators and there will be victims. But again, most cases, the perpetrator is in the same house at the same time. So do I expect a call to come in from anybody who's living in a one-room hall kitchen to say, I am under stress? How many people know? So what we have done, and which we feel is important, is to make people know that there is a facility and service available. So the moment that person has the opportunity, hopefully when the lockdown gets over, then they can reach out to us. So our domestic abuse space has been included. So we have people like Elsa and Supreet who are working with us to say, yes, you can reach out to us here for mental wellness. This is where it is. For legal support, we'll help you out. And if it goes to an acute case of physical abuse, then we also partnered with the Mumbai police to say, we'll connect you to the Mumbai police, and the Mumbai police will step in and take over. So created a kind of a multi-pronged grid there. On mental wellness, yes, people are stressed out. All forms of misinformation, too much of information, job losses, health worries, unsure of what's happening in the future. All these factors are coming in, apart from the fact that you're locked down, so you're cooped up and your hands and legs are tied. So anxiety levels, you worked in the space for so long that it's not easy at all. Some of us have self-coping mechanisms, but even if we are as counselors, we need to be counseled. So imagine those who never had access to counseling, and now they are forced upon with a new situation which is unprecedented, with with only access to information which gives you bad news, then expecting a normal behavior is going to be really challenging.
Right. So, Shishir, I would like to tell you about, this population that we have been closely working with. One of them is cancer patients. We work with many cancer patients and their families because we have been offering them emotional support. You know how doctors are,
Yes.
and the entire medical fraternity is offering physical support, right? But what about their mental space? That any case when they're dealing with a disease, and not only cancer patients, people with chronic ailments. So you are, as you understand that it's not only the patient but the entire family that gets affected.
True.
And so we have been over the last 4 years working with this population very, very closely. What happened during the lockdown is that, I personally got many calls where the hospitals shut, around, in and around, if I can imagine, to speak about Tata Memorial Hospital, many of the residential facilities were had to close down.
Yeah.
So there was a big, number of people who had nowhere to stay. So that was a problem. So there was no, even though the TMH has done exemplary work also, they've tried to help as much as they can. But even then, there were some people who were getting left out. And then the treatment dates were getting delayed and they didn't have a space to stay. So I understood that how they were really at a loss. And secondly, people who were out of town and whose dates were also there to come to Mumbai for, date to come and meet the doctor. So that was also getting delayed. So there was, I know a couple of people who were thinking from Kolkata because, since I'm from Kolkata, I have some people with other agencies who I work with. So they would call me and say, Didi, amra to more jabo, that we will die without the treatment. Because what happens is, so they were not being able to access any treatment in Kolkata also. So you just see what it did to people who were already vulnerable. And so that is once again with the children that we work with underprivileged homes. uh, we have been working in the space of providing them with value education, so that our normal education syllabus does not offer. So a lot of these children have had to suddenly move away. Their parents have taken them to the villages. So I feel that there suddenly those children have been disrupted or dislocated from the space of their comfort. So
True.
I feel that would also have a huge emotional setback for them as well, apart from the academics that can be, even for them to suddenly, because they are whatever it is, they are familiar with this city, suddenly to be able to just be uprooted and get used to a village life or for how long I don't know. But and also
True.
I feel that this whole movement for in terms for the children, I feel that not only are there is going to be disruption in the studies, but also there is this susceptible to child labor, child abuse, all of that. So these are things that needs to be really, really kind of addressed, and I'm sure it will be, but definitely a setback. And Shishir, Artscape has had the opportunity to work with your organization for the Smiling School project. Uh, what do you like my understanding of these children, that there will be some emotional setback which will need a little while to kind of deal with, get over with. What do you think, as the lockdown is opening up, what do you think is the future of the school education or this kind of Smiling School program?
So we've already been working with the government on the way forward, and I'm sure there are other organizations also working in that space. Um, One is the life will not be the same for some time for sure, which means yet the government's role is to ensure that normalcy restores. Now, what is normalcy under abnormal circumstances is they may want education to continue, which means even if there is a lockdown or lockdown gets lifted, we are not likely to see children heading to school immediately because a lot of these schools are currently quarantine zones where patients are still being treated. So 15th of June is when normal schools begin. Obviously, that's not going to happen. We are looking at maybe June, July, August, somewhere when, assuming at this point things start getting normal, 3 months or 2, 3 months of outdoor education will get impacted. which means that has to be indoor education, which means digital learning. That also means new tools of dissemination of information, which also means overexposure to these kind of tools, which also means children still remaining indoors. So two parts I will break this into. One is the formal learning, how it gets into children's lives. What we are trying to work with the government is to say that let's not relook at recreating a formal model that once you go into a sixth standard, if you were in school, these are the lessons that you learn. Let's give children that space. It's a matter of 2-3 months. Can they just relearn what they learned in the fifth standard, just so that they're in touch with education? Maybe 1 or 1.5 hour of education every day. Don't burden a child with 5-6 hours of digital learning at this point, because it'll really play with their mind. Also, there is a limitation of data, limitation of technology. Homes have access to internet at the level that some homes may have. We need to look at an equitable form of teaching and learning. So how do we ensure access? That's one part. And the second is the impact on mental health of the child. That anyway, it's been 3 months that a child who's in a lockdown space has not gone out to play. Physical learning is so critical. So open space is so important. That's part of your growth. How it manifests into de-learning of a child is unimaginable. Now we need to first attend to those, and it's not going to be an overnight situation. So we are working with the teachers because this is the most important space. We are working with the teachers right now to ensure that teachers become emotionally strong, and that has been the foundation of the Smiling School project. Can we ensure that teachers become emotionally stronger? That way, teachers who are on the WhatsApp group with the children ensure a more emotionally healthier dissemination of non-educational learning to them. Gradually, as things start opening up, then we start working with the children to ensure that they first feel that yes, they are back in normal space. It's not going to be an easy task, but as one of the roundtables that some of us had in the mental health space, we said now this could be an opportunity to turn the entire teaching mechanism on its head and think out of the box and see what new methods of mental wellness teaching can be done. Rather than saying, how do I, so far we were doing a teacher training and then dissemination with children program. Now we don't have that opportunity. So what do we do? So let's say there's no electricity in the house, and most homes have electricity driven gas connection. Now, if there's no electricity, what do you do? So you need to relook at, so the refrigerator is not working, the gas is not working. So how am I going to cook? So obviously it's not going to be cooked food. So we look at different forms of food, which is pre-cooked yet nutritious. So let's start thinking on those lines to say that old world is gone. Let's learn to live with the new world and see what the child wants and what the child can accept, not what I want to give it to them. So we're working on those lines. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. But at the crux of it all is the child's mental health, which has always been our case. And we work together on the Smiling School project. Important that no child should be deprived of emotional wellness at this stage.
And also I would believe that, see, whatever they have seen at home, because see, as parents, we our anxiety, our fear, our helplessness, our anger gets, the child takes the brunt of it.
True.
The atmosphere at home is what for all our children, if so, which is why at times as parents we are also very hesitant to show our emotion, that if I'm scared, I don't want to show that because that will upset my girls. I understand that. So most of the time as parent, and also see, as individuals, we are prone to be not be vocal about our emotions. We do not want to speak about our fears. We don't want to feel, which is why all the way we understand that why it is very, very important to first acknowledge our emotion. What are we feeling, good and the bad? And then we can act on it. And that helps us build our own inner resilience and our inner strength. Because in a situation like this, I feel that, and I felt that it is my own resilience and my own inner strength that can help me stay positive and fight this.
Yeah,
Because
I agree completely. Yeah,
so
it's important to give a safe space. While a child also is seeing a lot, and we are assuming that he's not seeing the right things when he's at home right now. But can we make the child feel that there is an opportunity, and not just the child, but every member of any family, because we're talking about mental health, but yes, child also, that yes, there is a safe space available for him or her to open up and to go to or to lean on when there are when the need arises. And that is what we need to now create. That yes, these are safe space pockets. To give you a very an analogy, it's like a puppy, and you tie down a puppy or a pet in a cage for a long time. And the moment you open the cage and you see the puppy or a pet running helter skelter, which is not, which everybody else gets unnerved. Now you're going to see that kind of a pattern happening. But for children who are cooped up and locked indoors, they will come out for the first few days. It's not going to be a very normal behavior. So, and not all of them will come back. It's like a spring. You hold a spring and then you leave it, and then it ricochets for some time before it comes back to normal. But not all springs will come back to normal. Some will lose its strength. There are, and which we what we need to work on those children, because what impact it's going to have on a child's psyche at this point, and for that matter, every person's, is difficult to imagine. But yes, there are experts who are in the space. There are studies going on. When we started, you asked me about